Full disclosure, we are a startup and things have been insanely busy, pretty much 24/7. And I've been buried in our front end and some issues with that for the past few weeks. So some of the things, the detailed stuff, I'm probably a little dull on. Also been a little sick this week, but anything that I can't answer, any detailed question anybody has, I'm happy to meet up with you this afternoon at the at ITAC, at the barbecue, or anytime we can sit down and go through. I can show you anything that you want to see that we've been digging through. So what Jeremy asked me to come and talk to everybody, and I'm going to keep it a little high level, but really talking about graph application development with AWS Neptune, Amplify, and AppSync. Forgot to add that on the title there, but and really kind of why we went that way and what we're doing with it from the standpoint of that being very viable for rapid application development versus, you know, a lot of the traditional development. My background is, as Jeremy was saying, I've been a software engineer and a team leader and division head and all kinds of other things in tech for 2.5 decades or so now. So I've got some background in AWS, was out of it for a couple of years doing some stuff with Azure, came back to it when we did this startup. So first of all, just a little background on like who we are and what kind of led us to where we are. That's a nice picture right there in the middle of my business partner, Ian Hoppe, and I doing our power pose over at Hardware Park in the cheesiest manner possible. But you see right here in the background there, that is what they call a single line diagram. So what we did is that Ian used to be an electrician, you know, years ago, and the process for collecting electrical data about systems and doing analysis on it to keep the whole thing brief is very, very manual. We found, you know, he came and talked to me about it a little over a year ago, and we just found that it was rife for digital disruption. It's one of the last like frontiers of digital transformation that we could see out there. These electricians are out in the field, like the lady in the picture there, and they collect information about these systems on paper. The paper gets, you know, out of date or lost easily, or is not easy to access. So every time somebody has to have work done on an electrical system in like a, you know, medium-sized commercial and industrial facility, they got to go and try and find paper. And almost every time they end up re-auditing this time after time after time. So we decided we want to create a software as a service platform where people could, these electricians of facilities could have this information available digitally, and we can do analysis on their electrical systems and IoT devices so that we can get real-time information about, you know, temperature, humidity, power consumption, things like that. Not to go too deep into that, but that's kind of the background there. And like Jeremy was saying, we looked out, and after we absolutely boned our interview to try and get into TechStars, we still ended up getting selected as one of the 10 for and it's the first accelerator for TechStars in Alabama, here in Birmingham. It is EnergyTech. It's got a lot of backing from Alabama Power, Power South, and a bunch of other people. So it was, you know, us and 9 other really just fascinating and awesome different electricity-based startups and people doing all kinds of fascinating work through that. We had a great experience through TechStars, and we were trying to work and put together our app while we were in program, so we'd have something to show that we were other than smoke and mirrors and a good idea. Matter of fact, one of the people on the call, Dave Cowart, was one of the first folks that did a lot of work on our app with me. Hi, Dave.
We love you, Dave.
Yeah, so we went through TechStars, got out of TechStars, still building, still trying to get to product. We got lucky, got a round of funding, and around last March, April, and everything, we kind of hit the ground running. But that being said, that has a lot to do with our use case. But first of all, I'll just kind of go through some quick stuff about like what is AppSync and Amplify, and then we'll talk about why we decided to use that. So Amplify's JavaScript library is provided by AWS. It lets you easily use the services that AWS offers and a lot of the power with a really kind of simple CLI to get up and running. It essentially helps you marshal your entire stack and everything without having to, know all the ins and out of SAM and a bunch of other services. AppSync is a service provided by AWS. So it's basically, it provides a GraphQL server-side API for you, and you can, connect to it via IAM, Cognito, to authenticate, and essentially, provides a nice data store object to your end code. DynamoDB, most everybody here is familiar with Dynamo, et cetera, so on and so forth. Dynamo is like the main one of the main integrated data products that you can target with AppSync. And GraphQL, everybody probably knows, but that's a query language for our API. It's not tied to anything specific database or storage wise. And because we're planning on having different sources of data down the road. And then we'll probably mention it some, but the GraphQL.schema is the schema file that Amplify generates and that you modify for your own needs when you're using it. And that kind of becomes your gold standard for what applications expect your GraphQL services to provide in terms of data without knowing exactly where all that data comes from, of course. And also stop me at any time with any questions anybody has, just shout out. So Neptune, Neptune is essentially the managed service for graph database that Amazon's offered. It's relatively new, but it's a really awesome, fast, reliable, fully managed service. It's highly available, got read replicas, point-in-time recovery, and all of that stuff, continuous backup to S3, based on Blaze Graph initially. I think there's an acquisition there a few years ago, and that's kind of where that came from. And one thing it's important to note is that Neptune supports both the Apache's Gremlin Tinkerpop and SparkQL for both query language, and you can use both on the same Neptune instance, which is kind of cool. Now for us, we we took a look at both and kind of decided unanimously with different people that I talked to that we wanted to go the Gremlin Tinkerpop route. For one, I really like the name, that's cool. But it is just more of a readable traversal query language, and SparkQL just felt very XML-y to us, and so that's the way we went. So all of our stuff is in Tinkerpop, but of course you can use both of those apparently. But yeah, I mean, you can build queries with that to navigate all of those highly connected data sets, and exposes a lot of the other AWS product features and whatnot. So that's kind of the basics of of the different products that we're kind of talking about, what we're putting together, and we'll talk about why now. So yeah, that's cool and all, but why? For one, managed services, right? One of the things I have to give a good shout out to the Amazon folks is that when we went through TechStars, we one of the mentors who was available through TechStars as one of the reps for working with startups and innovation through AWS. Kevin King, super great guy. We got a good relationship with him, and AWS offers a lot of different paths for getting credits to be able to work startups so that you can, reliably get through and spend through a bunch of stuff without spending a fortune. So one that was, that of course factored into part of our decision to kind of go that way. But at the same time, like, these are managed services. We didn't want to have to stand up a bunch of instances and manage those initially. We wanted to be able to spin these things up really fast and pay for what we're using. The second reason why we were looking to use all of these different managed services instead of writing and configuring everything ourselves is speed to market. We start off as a two-man company with some contract help here and there. doing some things, but we have to get to market quickly. We're sprinting downhill with no shoes on, so we need to get there as quick as we can. It allowed us to get to an MVP really fast, and get our proof of concept and then sprint towards an MVP. The flexibility, particularly with AppSync and Amplify in particular, the Amplify data store and that access to that GraphQL API model is both available. We're going to have a mobile app, a tablet application we're working on, and a React website, and that is available across both of those. And developers working on those will have a common way to talk to all of the data that we're going to be storing and gathering, which is, on the back end is in different formats and different APIs potentially down the road. We have easy GraphQL, like I was saying, consolidating, mapping all of that stuff together. One of the things too is that using all of it, as with a lot of things with AWS, it's fully code driven. So, our GitHub holds, the one repo holds everything about our application, but also the specifics of our stack, and the cloud formation templates, everything else right there. So we can literally stand the whole environment up with one push, in essence. AppSync in particular provides, one of the big reasons why we went with that was that it provides the offline and real-time data resolution. So we're looking at having electricians out in the field with an Android and iOS tablet, right? And we need those guys to be able to collect data wherever they are, not worry about losing it, but also see what each other's doing when they get on data, and know and kind of mitigate that synchronization between those. But then potentially down the road, somebody back at the home office, electrical engineer, can see what these guys are doing while they're doing it. There's a lot of different ways to do that, a lot of different products. AppSync gave us a really good way to not have to write a lot of that custom code and everything like that. A couple of quick notes about the cons, particularly when it comes to Amplify and whatnot, and I'll justify that by saying that in our instance, in a use case that we're looking at, these aren't cons for us, but they could be for anybody who's just trying to use these for whatever you're doing. But I kind of joke with a number of people with AppSync is that I hope you like the defaults. What it marshals in your stack and things like that is fairly, it's fair. I hate to say linear, but and you can customize a lot with it with custom cloud formation templates and integrate those into your scripts. But there's just some things that are very difficult or maybe not able for you to try and do. At that point, though, my answer, if anybody asks, what are all those things and whatnot, there's a few things that we've ran into, but for the most part, it's if you're trying to do something really, really specific with Amplify, then maybe you should be using SAM and bite that bullet. That may be something we do down the road, but for now, it's been really good for us to get up and going really fast. And I've heard a number of people talk about having like multiple app environments together. Using AppSync and Amplify could be potentially problematic. Again, that's not an issue for us, so I can't talk too much about a lot of details with about what some people are seeing with that, but it makes sense considering how those are kind of put together there. Anybody have any questions so far? Good. So yeah, kind of the big picture, what I was talking about there. We've got, you can have your enterprise apps, web apps, mobile apps, dashboards, and for us, we're going to have our own IoT devices using AWS IoT, with MQTT, all of these different things. AppSync gives you that common GraphQL API. We talk to all of those different sources of data as they're listed right there on the screen through Lambda resolvers. And there's a couple of other options. I'll talk about that in a little bit because we had some specific things that we ran into that we weren't able to do purely with Lambda resolvers. But those resolvers, I mean, they're Lambdas fairly much like anything else, but they're very specific to essentially triggering events between what's being requested in GraphQL and what you need to your CRUD operations variously on the back end. So also too, all of that, everything you're doing with AppSync works really well. It's hooked up with CloudWatch, so you've got all that monitoring and insights and everything too still. One of the things that is worth talking a little bit is that it's really good for us, and is the way that AppSync handles subscriptions. We don't have to for what we're doing, and for a lot of uses, we don't have to try and stand up and configure a lot of stuff with SQS and everything else. With support implementation with MQTT over WebSockets, and then the new pure WebSockets protocol are relatively new for real-time GraphQL subscriptions. So you've got the concept of subscriptions in there where people can subscribe to certain events, messages, and things like that, so that you can have all of that data moving back and forth in real time in the back end there. So just to talk a little bit about our specific how we've implemented what we're doing there. First of all, you've got customers, whether web portal or mobile app, they're hitting that Amplify, and we're using Amazon Cognito. Again, another great built-in managed service. Big fan of Cognito there. It's got the built-in user tools, lets us do a lot with that. We're doing a good bit with roles, and looking to expand that a little bit right now, to be able to handle all of that and then integrate it with the schema on the graph database in Neptune too, which is hopefully going to be pretty slick. We're kind of in the middle of doing some of that right now, but the thing is you're getting that common way, whether you're developing your web app or the mobile app or whatnot, you've got that Amplify data store available to you, a common way between the developers both working in the app and the website to be able to get to all of the different data that we have going forward through basically that common GraphQL API. And data synchronization. Now, this is one of the places we're talking about. We did something, one of the places I've talked about, we did something a little specific. So first of all, when we were looking at this, we really wanted to go direct to Neptune. And we first took wired up our Amplify and AppSync to be able to, be able to have Lambda resolvers that resolve directly to Neptune. What we found is that we ran into a number of issues with that, in the way that all that works, and how it originally we were writing everything to Dynamo. What we did, because we had to be really fast, again, remember startup, we got to move fast. We'd love to try and spend a long time trying to resolve all of that. We had done some custom cloud formation templates and stuff inside of Amplify. It was really neat, but it just wasn't working for us. So when somebody is making that request, particularly when they're trying to make sure that when the app has to make sure that the data is synchronized, or somebody is in particular doing a write operation, all of that goes to a DynamoDB schema initially. Through the resolvers of GraphQL, but then we decided to went in and tap into the DynamoDB streams on kind of under the hood there, and we have some just regular lambdas that essentially issue those update and synchronization commands to Neptune. So for the most part, we wanted Neptune to be our source of truth. Going back just a little bit, Remember I first showed you guys the electrical single line diagram that we had? That thing is kind of like a family tree, right? You've got, your service from Alabama Power, whatever, maybe some generators, and then there's some equipment hooked to it. For that equipment branches into other equipment to other equipment. These can get relatively large at, 300-400 pieces of equipment with a tremendous amount of detail, but also the things, the raceways, the conductors, everything that connect two different pieces of electrical equipment. In our particular case, there is metadata about that and information about the connection between those that is just as valuable and sometimes more than the things that they're connecting. So that's, that led us straight to basically a classic, graph math problem. And instead of trying to stand up, a Neo4j server and everything like that, we wanted to try and resolve that using Neptune. But that's why on the back end there that we're leaning so hard on trying to have this graph database in the equation, because it's going to be the best way to look at that. We kind of I did a few kind of early proof of concept tests of trying to model how our data is connected with both, the connections between different pieces of equipment having its own metadata and own very important information, whatnot, using SQL and even some NoSQL. And it was going to be very problematic down the road and potentially disastrously hard to optimize once it gained more and more complexity. Having this in a graph database is just a natural solution for us. It just, it fits what the problem called for. So, but anyway, going back to that, we're using lambdas then, something gets written, DynamoDB, the DynamoDB streams, the lambda kicks, make sure that Neptune is up to date. We originally, like I said, wanted Neptune to be our source of truth. And the way that we've ended up so far, it kind of is. We just have to sort of go through DynamoDB on the way there. So now, and like I said, on data synchronization, that's really kind of when people are writing data, more or less from the web portal or from the app. If you need to actually change something about an electrical system or whatnot, that's kind of the process and how that rolls through there. Now, when users are interacting with the system, it's a little bit different. So, if somebody's doing a request to get data, the AppSync GraphQL actually has a Lambda resolver that goes directly to Neptune. So we can, there's always a concern with DynamoDB about performance, right? I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on that. But performance under scale or with tremendous amounts of data is a concern. There are some things you can do to mitigate it, but as I said too, that it's also not the ideal way to solve a graph problem, a graph database is. So we didn't want to try to be reading from DynamoDB for all the various requests, everything we did, so that when somebody's making a request for data, they want to get an electrical system or a part of an electrical system, or maybe just a panel, it actually uses a Lambda resolver, it goes directly to Neptune. If they're looking for referential data, so, like the list of people that manufacture panels. So I want to enter a new panel in my system. I need to get a list of every type of panel this could be. That still comes from DynamoDB because that's a strictly referential type of problem, and DynamoDB is well suited for handling that. So we kind of keep reference data about what a system could be in DynamoDB that gets retrieved on reads when they need it, or the actual implementation of things like what actual panels and transformers and breakers, et cetera, so on, are out in the field are coming straight from Neptune. So talk a little bit about app deployment. That's one of the things, excuse me, that we're still trying to get all of this perfected, but right now, and of course it'll never be perfect, right? But right now, everything about our app, our website, our entire stack, how it's configured, even our VPC, And all of that setup is all handled through the scripts that through everything is only GitHub in the repo, in the backend stuff. And one of the great things that Amplify and does for you is when you're using that and configuring stack, it generates all of the, a lot of JavaScript, a lot of the different scripts, the cloud formation templates you need. There's a lot of stuff that you can customize in there for like specific environments. So that, we have multiple AWS environments right now, kind of like we have a sandbox and we have a production environment. One of the guys that's working with us is currently standing up a staging environment today, which will be relatively quick. He's just got to have a branch that's got the right changes in it to be able to talk to that specific environment. And then it's just an Amplify push, and that stack exists when it's done. So, you've got that Amplify on the back end there. The way that we're trying to make this work going forward is that when someone does an Amplify push, they're pushing changes that are going up to the back end, whether it's adding something to the schema or a new a new endpoint or something like that. They actually execute that Amplify push. Amplify back end has kind of some really great hooks built in for CI/CD, where we run our CI/CD tests and then deploy to the appropriate environment, which includes whatever changes we need with Cognito, way AppSync is configured, the Lambdas, the Lambda resolvers, DynamoDB and Neptune. And soon to be, it's not on here yet because we're still kind of messing around with it, but the things that we're doing for our IoT stack on that end with AWS IoT. And that's kind of the long and short of it. So, at the end of the day, like we've had a lot of success, and we've been able to get a couple of pilots done already that we learned a lot from. We're going back and changing things in our app, but what we're not having to do is go back and resolve a bunch of problems on our back end. You may not, definitely are not going to have like a huge amount of flexibility kind of going the route with Amplify and AppSync, but we found that it's been flexible enough for the problems we're facing. But then again, like I said, we're a startup. We're trying to move very fast, and we've got to get our product to market fast. So, standing up our back end, it took a guy that a contractor who's had some experience doing some of the stuff myself, about a month, doing all of this with SAM, SQS, a lot of the ways that we could have done that. It'll probably taken 3 times that long or more, in my opinion, looking at it. So it's been a great kind of experience for us, and not without its trials and travails like everything else, but we're pretty happy with it. And because of the managed services, for the most part, a lot of these, there are some specific instances where we may have to worry about scalability going forward, but more for the most part, everything that we're seeing and all the people we talk to who are doing kind of some similar things are able to handle things at scale, except for known choke points. If you're dependent on DynamoDB to do things that it's not meant to do, then you're definitely going to see some issues. But those are, but you've got other options for there with Aurora and kind of like our hybrid Frankenstein that I was showing you guys, where we're kind of on the tapping those DynamoDB streams to be able to write things directly to Neptune. So that's kind of the long and short of it. So just kind of want to go through all of that, and if anybody has any questions or we have any other discussion, everything, I'm happy to go with that.
I have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned IoT and some MQTT. Are you guys going to be planning on taking like sensor data of some kind, meter readings or temperature and things like that?
Yeah. So part of what we're trying to do, and one of the reasons why we're kind of doing what we're doing here with Conduit is not, we want to be able to make electrical systems less effort for people to maintain and reduce the wasted labor, but also, make these things safer, make sure people understand a lot more about what's going on in their electrical system. So right now we're working with some guys. We've got a couple of test sensors out in the field right now that we got through some folks, but we're getting some ones that kind of put together specifically for our needs that are going to be able to measure temperature, like temperature changes, humidity, and then power consumption, voltage and amperage. Hopefully we'll get all of that worked out. The reason being is that we can have these devices out in electrical rooms and people can monitor, of course, rapid changes in temperature in electrical system, that's coming from a loss of power. That could mean anything as easy as you've got a loose lug in a panel that's getting hot that you're not going to know unless somebody opens it and takes a picture with an IR camera, that you're losing power, like you're losing electricity. It could mean that you're seeing a situation where you're getting some wire burn or something like that could start a fire over time. In just a couple of pilots that we've had, following the process that we have for Conduit and the app, just trying to testing our app, we kind of proved our use case because we found issues in older electrical systems. We have a part of our app that is like, oh, you can't connect these two things together if these wire, these conduit and raceway types don't match. You got to go figure out what's in between them. Well, we were at a place, and when we went and looked at what was in between them, the electrician opened up an LB on the side of a building, and there was an electrical wire. It was almost rubbed all the way through, which is, at best, a fire. Catastrophically, an arc flash incident in this electrical room, and then a really big fire. So that's been really cool. But yeah, that's our intention, is to have those IoT devices out there so that, people in industrial, particularly industrial, large commercial, medium to large commercial, whatnot, can monitor what's going on. It also dovetails nicely into a lot of people we've talked to that both do like solar retrofits and LED retrofits, because one of the problems those guys are facing is they can't easily come in and tell people exactly how much they're going to save. Like, they can look at the kind of lighting that they have and their power system and run some formulas and go, it's probably going to be fairly close to this, but it just doesn't feel credible a lot of times to a lot of their clients, even though they're pretty good at it. But if they have the kind of data that we're talking about, generating both this super granular view, every last detail in this electrical system, but also with that tremendous amounts of telemetry data coming in, they can actually do the math and tell them exactly how much money they can save them, because they can look at the power consumption that's coming from panels that feed specific lighting arrangements and know what kind of power it's actually using right now. That's one of the things, like Alabama Power, they do a really great job, and they've got IoT meters and in a lot of places and things like that. That's all ends at the service before it comes in the building. On the inside of the building, a lot of people have no idea what's going on in their electrical systems, and we're trying to fix that.
Cool, thank you.
Tyrone, you got a question?
Yes. First, I want to have some clarification first. I was wondering, are you using cloud formations and SAM?
No, we're not using SAM at all right now. We're using Amplify, is basically generates all of the scripts. It goes into our GitHub and everything that essentially handles all of that, the stack marshaling and configuration and everything. You can add additional or customize some of the cloud formation templates, because at the end of the day, Amplify is creating cloud formation templates for you on the back end. And that's just to clarify too, for anybody that's not familiar, particularly with Amplify, but even AppSync, they're really kind of like a simplified common language interface, a CLI, for the services that AWS already offers there, right? They're giving you kind of, it's kind of like the easy button to get up to speed. I've got, basically one Amplify CLI, and I issue commands. It may be, you know, it may be doing something with a cloud formation template or anything like that. A lot of different things like that. So a lot of those services are they're kind of under the hood of Amplify. What it means is that, you know, is a lot easier for us to kind of get up to speed with Amplify and AppSync to be able to do some of the things we do, we needed and configure them, but I didn't have to go through learning all the ins and outs of SAM and about 8 different products. I've got that common language interface, and that's what makes it valuable for us, or in my opinion, anybody who's doing like rapid prototyping, proof of concepts, and even though if you have like, you know, if you have basically a linear path in what you're doing, you don't have like a gigantic enterprise system where 1,000 different things are connected together, but you're like, I need an app and a website that does this very specific thing and I need it fast, even in an enterprise environment. I think that and from talking to people who've done that, the path of Amplify and AppSync is very viable.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and to add on to that a little bit, you know, when I was first working with this, and like I said, Dave Cowart's on the call. He's one of the guys that I bounced a lot of stuff off of, and we collaborated a ton initially, and just basically was like, what are we gonna do? And Dave worked with us some initially before he went off to make that West Coast money, and Ian's laughing at me over here. Just kidding, Dave. No, but that was one of the things we talked about, you know, using serverless. We talked about SAM. We kind of looked and messed around with some different things. And we're like, you know what, the fastest way we're going to be able to get to where we want to be is, you know, using Amplify and with AppSync. Like, you know, it is really kind of, it essentially allows you to stand this stuff up relatively quickly, actually really quickly compared to individually, you know, configuring, setting up, writing code in all these different products and multiple scripting languages and whatnot. I mean, if you've got people, you know, if you got a team of AWS DevOps and software engineers who are really familiar with all those products, by all means, man, go with, you know, do SAM, do all of those different things, stand up your own EC2s for your databases, everything like that. If you've got Jim and some contract help and not a lot of time, then Amplify and AppSync can really, in my opinion, can really help you get where you need to be quickly. That doesn't mean we're necessarily going to be there forever, but that's, you know, that's a decision that we can make down the road and plan for and do that. But at the point that we're seeing things and with the stuff that we're doing already and testing, that point is probably even further out than I initially thought it might be.
Hey, Jim, this is Chris Blyden. I wanted to ask you kind of follow up on that. Did you guys have any experience with already writing mobile apps or React apps or anything like that before you kind of started on this endeavor with Amplify and AppSync?
Yeah.
We did. Okay.
Yeah, we did have some experience with that, but at the same time, like me personally, I was not an expert in I myself had not done a lot of GraphQL. I had some familiarity, had messed around with a couple of systems on the periphery and whatnot, and you know, really needed to get going fast. So
Right.
actually learned a lot more about it through being able to get up and going really quick with Amplify.
Oh, well, that's awesome. That's exactly what I was going to ask you. If you thought that Amplify and AppSync helped you learn faster along the way, that if that was something that kind of not only allowed you to move quickly, but it also taught you along the way.
Yeah, and it has a lot. It's been like one of the valuable things about it, because like I said, I was kind of in a position where what we want to do on our stack and our architecture, it made the most sense with AWS. We had really great credits and great relationship and everything, but I had not worked with AWS at that point in almost 2 years. So, you know, I'd done a bunch of stuff in the past, but I was like, you know, I'm gonna have to, you know, all right, I'm gonna have to dust it off. I'm gonna have to learn a few new things, see what's changed while I've been over playing in, you know, a different cloud provider and whatnot. But
Right.
Yeah, so Amplify and AppSync, though, as I've gone along, has taught me a lot more about, helped me figure out why we had stuff that was actually able to work and serve what we're doing. And I've learned a lot more about GraphQL in general and graph databases and how they work by utilizing Neptune and everything. So most of the startup, a lot of that stuff has been really easy and really informative. But when you run into issues and whatnot is when we resolve some issue, something that wasn't working just like we thought it would be. With Amplify and AppSync, and every one of those has been kind of an opportunity to go, oh, okay, that doesn't work the way I thought it is because AppSync's trying to do it like this, and I misunderstood how that works. So it's also it's been a bit it's been kind of a good learning tool as it is too. And one of the developers that we've had working with us, he says the same thing and whatnot. But I will say though, at the same time, it's not. I would. A lot of people you'll talk to and they kind of look at like Amplify and AppSync as training wheels, but and in some ways that metaphor kind of holds true. But for me, like it's very, I've talked to several people who are, one of the guys that's doing some contract work for us, they're doing some DoD work that is highly secure, and you can't tell us a lot about what it is, but they're delivering data to the field for basically soldiers that are in compromised situations and whatnot with an app, and this is very similar stack to what they're doing. But it's very siloed and everything. Of course, it's in government cloud with AWS and everything. But they were like, it made sense. It allowed us to get the proof of concept and MVP up, and it works and it's scalable.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, so maybe those two aspects, maybe as you've been as it's accelerated your sort of knowledge on these things, like you had said, but it also often on a different side of that would be that it's also accelerating your ability to deliver fast. So like you said, even if you did know everything that you're doing, you still get the speed of development and deployment and things like that, where you're like a limited shop. Like you said, if you've got a big shop and you've got experts across the board who are all very opinionated about how each of their things are done, right, you would probably go with something like you said, Sam, or something like that, where you're where everybody can kind of demonstrate their skills into that whole process. But so I love that whole application of how you did that, and especially in the GraphQL side, because I think that's like a really big new area that I think is really interesting as far as kind of like developing your interface in the back end. I think that's a really cool use. I've got one other question I was going to ask you too, and that was, you kind of talked about developing these ontologies basically of electrical equipment. How did you build those ontologies ahead of time, and then the field people are just sort of selecting and configuring specific instances of that, or are you actually entering? So in other words, do you have like a catalog library that you have configured off on the side, and now the field people are just kind of configuring, or does the app itself also put in all that data ontology?
The answer, and that's a good question. The answer to your question is yes.
Okay.
So it would be ideal from a user experience perspective, having all of the referential data for every type of breaker, every type of wire panel that was ever made in a great, in a database at the back end where everything is just select from this list. That would be fantastic. Unfortunately, like the manufacturers of that, the people that hold that data, and some of the ones that have it, which are 40, 50-year-old software companies who have been holding the industry hostage with their lack of innovation for 30 years, are not really nuts about just handing that to people. So we've had some luck talking to some manufacturers and whatnot that kind of see where we're going down the road. They have given us some data. We've gotten some data that is publicly available off of their websites and everything like that. But at the same time, we're building that data as we go, because if we can't get that data legitimately from somebody, then we're just going to build it as people enter these systems. And then so eventually there will be a large repository, hopefully, of all, almost all the electrical equipment that can exist in the world.
Well, you're
Or at least the initial.
obviously you're leading that charge, so maybe that's something that you will be spearheading. Well, but yes, I'm curious how if you envision the app itself as being that interface into developing those hierarchies, or if you want to use like a separate. Okay. So you want to have your app putting that data into Neptune, or sort of like as a graphical interface.
Well, and I probably glossed over it a little bit earlier when I was talking about this. Let me see here. Yeah, so the data synchronization there and everything. So like I said, we're trying to store the information about like how the electrical systems are put together, like that single line. The relationships are super important and everything. Graph database is the way to go. So we're tapping in the Dynamo streams and pushing that into Neptune. So a Dynamo, for how somebody is configuring electrical system as they're doing it, really just kind of acts as a temporary cache. For lack of a better term for us, we're writing it to Neptune, but as they enter in pieces of equipment that maybe don't exist, like I've got this GE model 123 panel, and we see that we don't have a GE model 123 panel. At the same time, we're writing that GE 123 panel exists at Hardware Park in this room, and it's related to the system like this. We're also going, hey, Dynamo, there's a separate scheme over here. We write that reference data and know that that is a thing that exists. And then we're planning on having some essentially some lambdas that can kind of go and help us sanitize that data a little bit, because some of it just has to be entered right now. As that builds, essentially, we're trying to get it to where the electricians in the field will do less and less typing of new things as they go along, and more selecting. Because that improves their experience, but also gives us a really good long play with our business model and everything with that data. Because people say it, you hear it a million times in the last 10 years, data is the new oil, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate you doing this and walking us through this architecture. I think it's really cool. And you guys are a great showcase for all of these technologies. And I'm loving the use of Neptune and the graph database. You guys, that's a perfect use for Neptune. So anyway, thank you so much for walking us through all this.
And I just want to go back to something that you said earlier, Chris, talking about, having like a large group of AWS experts in the background. So what you're saying is it might be difficult to manage a large group of high functioning professional AWS engineers. That's part of that. And that part of it too is that a lot of this too is that right now, to be perfectly honest, I don't think it surprises anybody that we're talking to right now, but staffing, particularly with a startup and everything right now, is extremely difficult in Birmingham, but everywhere. You have 40% of people looking to change jobs or jumping jobs right now. Our lead React Native developer, a guy that we picked up that I worked with a year or two ago at a really cool IoT company out of Huntsville. We're both remote working. He's out in Seattle. He did some fantastic work. He picked up on, where we had done the early work on that, did some fantastic work for us, but then he started getting scouted, and finally he just took an offer from Apple, making 2.5 times what I could pay him. And I wasn't being, that's just the way that it is right now. So we're still looking for some AWS guys, that somebody, a person or two who's interested in working kind of in what I've been showing everybody here, but and in the meantime, we've got some good contract help, and that's just something we got to grow into and figure out.
Right. Well, again, I was gonna say I'm a developer myself, so it's funny. Everybody in the process of software development, we all have very specific and opinionated ideas about how each of those chunks work. So so that's like, especially sort of from the DevOps side and all the every piece of that. So yeah, it is, and like you said, it is difficult finding people today that have all the skills that you need to bring to bear on your specific problem that you're trying to solve too. So Yeah.
But, and that's kind of one of the good things, though, and I know we're getting a little low on time, but one thing I want to say specifically to the point that you just made, one of the things I'm kind of glad that we chose the route that we're going here is that, you know, we got some help from some guys, particularly on the back end side, some pretty experienced kind of contract folks who had done some very similar things to what we're trying to do for some large companies out there. And they kind of jump in, help you out with some projects for a couple of months, and then they're gone. But what it's done is that now that we've got a lot of that done, it solved a lot of our hard problems so that I don't have to try and find somebody who knows how all of these things work. They can kind of come in with the right amount of experience and follow kind of that same path and learn it a little easier than we have. Because it's all there. So part of that is that, you know, we're trying to do the right things. Even though we're a startup, we're moving fast. We're trying to document and draw diagrams and make sure that we understand what we've got and keep those up to date because we're changing it. You know, the stuff that I've showed you guys has changed probably 5 times significantly in like the last 3 months. So, and it's not something in a very large stack with a ton of different products and different scripting languages and everything that you can do easily. So that's the other thing is that it's allowed us to pivot in a few different decisions when we figured out, oh, that wasn't the right thing. Oh, right, we're there. So.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's very cool. Well, and to go back to Jeremy, because we're right at the top of the time, Jeremy is doing his best to facilitate that kind of talent and for all of us to learn and kind of build up Birmingham and Alabama as a place for you know, for us to have expertise in this town. So like you had said, Jim, but you know, it's something that we all want to do. We all want to make Birmingham a tech town. So yeah, so
absolutely.
Anyway, thank you so much again.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys having me.